morning, and in some cases, good afternoon and good evening from wherever you are joining us from for the opening talk show, Day 4, siberXchange 3.0. Today's focus is going to be healthcare. Now, in keeping in tune with the way I've started each of the opening talk shows, all of you know that this is intended to be a casual, almost like a fireside chat, talking to you a little bit about the concepts around healthcare and what to expect in the next 4 sessions happening throughout the day. In keeping with the way I've introduced every opening talk show, I'll reflect on why today is important. Well, not only is it important because it's siberXchange 3.0 Day 4, it's also important because the date is July 15th. And this was the day that my dear friend, Twitter, was launched. Now, you may be wondering, what does Twitter have to do with healthcare? But I think Twitter serves as a very appropriate metaphor when you think about the transformation that is happening when it comes to data, when it comes to patient data, and more importantly, when it comes to how we're digitizing the experience of our citizens when it comes to how they're accessing healthcare and how healthcare is being to them. My name is Abbas Hirji, and you know me as the host of the opening talk show, also the host of the Power Hour on the siberXchange platform. And before I begin, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, but I also want to thank the organizers for making this wonderful week happen, as well as the advisors who have put in a lot of time and effort to make sure that quality content, not necessarily a lot of quantity, but quality content is being delivered across this week. For those of you that have been tuning in, you can also attain your CPE credits up to 24 credits by reaching out directly to the team at siberX. All of you also know me as the lead for the Center for Cybersecurity Innovation and the AI Hub at Durham College, and it truly has been a pleasure to join you every morning and kick off the opening talk show. No talk show or no opening to a conference would be appropriate without an acknowledgement of the fact that we are coming to you and streaming live with Canada. Both my panelists today, my advisory members, are also joining in from Canada. And while we appreciate and acknowledge the great advances that we've made both in healthcare and in security, it is absolutely important to recognize that even as we come to you virtually, virtual space also constitutes indigenous space. I've said this before, and I will repeat it again. Our 5G networks, our fiber optic networks, our cables all run across planet Earth, all run across sacred land, all run across indigenous land. And take this time to recognize and appreciate the indigenous ancestry that runs deep within the Canadian context. An indigenous elder once told me that you can never awaken a person that is pretending to be asleep. And as an advisory board member to the siberXchange 3.0 platform, I make this statement not just for myself, but the organizers as well. That when it comes to healthcare and cybersecurity, not only are we talking about protecting our healthcare systems, but the right and the right of access, securing clean water, to securing good access to healthcare practitioners, to securing the right to give birth safely, should be a right that all Canadians should be involved in and all Canadians should have an access. We all look forward to working together to increasing services, especially in remote and rural communities, not access, but secure access to healthcare services. With that, I want to thank you all for tuning in. And for the next 45 minutes, we're going to have a nice casual conversation on what to expect when we talk about healthcare and security. 7% of healthcare institutions across North America are expecting to witness some form of an attack. The question is not about if it'll happen, but when it happens, how prepared are we? So please join me in welcoming both my advisory panel members today for a brief discussion. Firstly, I'm going to begin with Mary. Mary, who I met at CISO Forum Canada 2019. I'm a good friend, someone that I've had the pleasure of sharing the stage with on a couple of occasions, and I know she has a lot of insight to provide when it comes to this subject. Mary, thank you for joining us for the opening talk show. Can you tell us why cybersecurity in healthcare is such an important topic to you? Mary?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you. It runs very deep for me, especially with having elderly parents and with my father being sick last year. Just knowing that hospitals have the right security in place, it takes that piece off of your mind so you're there to spend whatever time you have left with your loved ones, right? Because that's very important. You don't want to think of, oh, my father's information is on X system or on this file chart, and you having to worry that it gets in the wrong hands, and just having whatever time left with them is just as important. So for me, it's critical. That's why I'm in this space.
Thank you, Marian. As always, staying true to your nature, you've always made sure not to just speak from a tech perspective, but from a person perspective. And that's what makes you extremely relatable. And I thank you again for taking the time, and more importantly, for having the strength to share your story. You and I have been conversing over the last year. I know it's been a difficult time for you. Growing is painful, and you know you've got the support of the wider cybersecurity. Great stuff. So thank you for opening us off from a very personal standpoint, as always, Mary.
You're welcome.
From Mary's side, I'm now going to take. Well, right now I'm tuning in from Ajax. I'm at this lovely studio, so I'll just. Normally I would board one of my advisory members' private jets and fly off to whatever country the other speaker was at. But in this case, I can just take an Uber or probably even walk over to Pickering and welcome my dear friend Asif Khan, who in the world of Twitter has a pretty fancy name. His name is Asif Khan, so he's titled himself as Contemplations. I thought I had a fancy Twitter name called Abbas Speaks, but Asif, you take the crown. Asif, how's it going? Welcome to your first show on siberXchange. And from your perspective, tell us a little bit about how your organization at GroundLevel Insights started to address certain issues. Asif?
Yeah, thank you. Excited to be here, and thank you, Ali, and to the whole Cyber Exchange team for the opportunity to participate and be part of this amazing group of people. GroundLevel Insights, we're a Pickering-based company, and we're kind of rooted in data and information, primarily around location and geospatial data. So we're the people that are like Big Brother, watching where everybody goes all the time and kind of modeling that and looking for insights around it. And specifically when it comes to healthcare, we've started, over the course of this pandemic to kind of look at, how we can relate the data that we have to help businesses and help government make better decisions around where to focus economic stimulus, how to, navigate through, the economy reopening in various stages. So because we see everywhere people move, we can tell you that this part of the city or this neighborhood or this postal code area, here's what case counts look like there right now versus here's what the foot traffic on the street looks like, and kind of be able to do predictive modeling around that. And so that's kind of one aspect of what we do. And then the second part is we have a platform called Canatrace, which we launched as a free service, fully bilingual, available nationally to any business that's required to do contact tracing and screening data collection. So that's both for employees as well as visitors and guests coming into bars and restaurants and every other business out there. So obviously there's a lot of data that's being collected there on behalf of businesses, and there's a lot of security and protection of that information that becomes very important.
Asif, when you started off the initiative in the Durham region and then it expanded to Canada and North America, I was reminded of that saying, right? It's businesses don't build themselves, people build businesses. And I really want to thank you for, from a healthcare perspective, taking the opportunity to engage the community with what was required. Building the tool Canatrace was, yes, it started off as we need this. It became something that your company has gravitated around. But more importantly, you've done it with trust. And there's a reason that major brands, but not just major brands, citizens, small businesses have been able to use your platform. And the fact that you've invested in R&D at Durham College, you've invested in research and development, really shows how you've gone out of your way to build trust in the community when it comes to digital healthcare tools. I know you often say that you don't have a security background. Well, if security falls under people, process, and technology, you've got the people and process on point, and you're building the technology one step. Good on you. Let's dive a little bit into the topic here. And Mary, I want to ask you this. I mean, healthcare is not just about access to services. It's also about the mental health space. It's also about how secure we feel within working in our environments. From a pandemic perspective, when you think about how the new threats that are now hitting the healthcare space, could you comment a little bit about why is the healthcare space suddenly seeing a surge, for example, ransomware or fake or phishing campaigns with fake emails telling people to click here to get their COVID vaccine or whatever have you. Is it just opportunistic, or has this always been the case and we're only just beginning to realize? Mary?
I think it's always been the case, but with COVID, I think people are finding ways of taking advantage. And phishing emails is one of the easiest methods of trying to manipulate individuals. And sometimes things come in so quickly, you don't take that extra second or two to actually look at that email, and you end up falling a victim for it. And as more and more organizations, go through some sort of an incident, organizations are ramping up on their security controls and making sure that they have the right solutions in place to help prevent things like ransom, educating their employees around phishing, etc.
I think that word education is so powerful, because at the end of the day, it is the only weapon that we have when it comes to progress and transformation. So working on that education piece, Asif, I'll bring you back into this, because the rest of the day we're going to be hearing from a couple of vendors that are responding to different challenge statements. One of the things that you've done very well with your product is you've built a service level agreement around it, but you've also tried to educate the how to use the tool, how to think about different situations. You've gone through compliance testing as well. You've gone slow, steady, and as Marge Simpson says, that apparently wins the race. Asif, can you talk to me a little bit about that onboarding process for your clients? It hasn't been, here's a tool, now use it. You've put a team behind that whole onboarding practice. Can you comment a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, the whole sort of creation of the CanaTrace platform was really, sort of started with, us just seeing businesses being asked to do contact tracing, collect contact information, ask symptom screening questions. And we just saw so many businesses early on doing that the easiest way they could, which is, here's a clipboard with a pen and a piece of paper, write your information down as you come into the business. And obviously, that's just, it's 2021. Why are we doing things on pen and paper, people's personal information sitting on a clipboard? So that was kind of the impetus for us to try to take that burden away from the business owner operator. It's not their core competency. They're in the business of creating a good food experience or a good gym experience or a good whatever they do. They're not in the business of data collection and management and security. So, we thought that's something we can help with. So ours is a very simple process. They fill out a one-page sign-up registration form, information about their business, address, contact information, about the business itself, and they upload their logo, because we brand the service for that particular business. And then basically we generate a custom QR code. It's all done and encrypted. When you scan the QR code, it goes to an encrypted URL, and that URL is unique to that particular business or restaurant or factory or whatever business is using it, and has the branding of that business. So it's quite simple. Typically, from filling out the registration form to getting them their QR code, it's an hour or two, and they've got what they need. They can print it out and start operationalizing it. Obviously, for larger brands and chains, like we work with Starbucks across the country, a lot of other big international and national brands, there's a bit more setup when you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of locations, but the onboarding process is quite easy. And then from a consumer point of view, all they really need to do is scan a QR code. So most modern smartphones can just natively do that with the camera apps. They don't need to download any additional app in order to do that. So for us, it's all about simplicity. It's just about simplicity, but leading to something that is secure and protected, and the consumer can feel like their information is being held in a on Canadian soil, and B in a secure way, and for the sort of required 30 days, which is what most provinces here in the country are requiring the business owner to keep the data for.
Asif, you come across very calm and collected, and I know you keep saying that it's been, you try to keep things simple, but as everybody knows, especially those who are in the DevOps space, simple is often challenging and complicated. You need the right minds at the table. So Asif, again, very well done on launching this. I said this when you began the project as well. Satya Nadella wasn't joking when he said, as a result of the pandemic, we've seen in 2 months, we've seen 2 years worth of innovation. Good job keeping pace with all of that and pivoting as necessary, because again, small businesses breathe life into our economy, and you've created jobs as a result, and you've hired a lot of students. Kudos and thanks for all of your support. A question has come in, and I'll just reshape it just a little bit. And Mary, I'll bring you back into the conversation. And this has to do with endpoint device management. Now, from a healthcare perspective, what are some of the concerns that come up? When more and more patients are connecting with devices, doctors are now using tablets to input healthcare information. They're using different devices now to even send off prescriptions. For example, one of the products that I've had the pleasure of working on is called Deliver North, and later on today, I'll be speaking with Light Medical as well as the Privacy Commissioner from the Government of Alberta. We'll be talking about a concept that they have ushered forward, which is see your doctor, get your meds delivered to your home. What are some of the concerns that you think arise from multiple devices connecting to a hospital's network? Mary?
When you're connecting to a network, you've got to ensure that that device has the proper security measures, from it being patched, from ensuring that encryption is enabled both at rest and in transit. Because if you are exchanging data, or if you're accepting something coming in, you want to make sure that it's scanned so there's nothing from a virus or a malware perspective, so it affects your device and vice versa. So having those measures in place is important. I know we all talk about, for example, with companies, BYOD. We've got to take the right measures to ensure that it's secure from end to end.
And I think one really interesting concept that came up yesterday when you mentioned end to end, and that was around visibility. Juniper spoke a lot about this, and as they present for the next two challenge statements in the day, visibility into what's happening onto the network. Darktrace spoke a lot about this as well. Often, and I found this particularly intriguing, is that once they do deploy their solutions, a lot of network folks are quite surprised to see the kind of endpoints that are actually connected to their network. They'll share credentials. Nearby facilities are still able to connect into your network. A whole bunch of things tend to happen when you begin to realize the big mashup and the mesh that is your network, and visibility is key. So I'm really looking forward to later on in the day when folks like Juniper start talking about how they've sort of opened up visions and created for more visibility. Thank you as always for that, Mary. Another question, and Asif, I'll bring this to you. And then Mary, there's one more question to you. So we'll go Asif and then we'll go Mary. So Asif, you've been in the, pivoted, you got into the space of healthcare and healthcare innovations, location data, care, so on and so forth. From an uptake perspective, what has been some of the resistance that you've seen from some businesses? They know they need to track this data. They know it's intended to keep people safe, especially if they've come into contact with someone who may have had the virus or anything else. What was some of the resistance to taking on this tool? Asif?
Yeah, thanks for the question. To be fair, I think we haven't actually seen a ton of resistance. I think for the most part, business owners are just happy to have somebody sort of manage this on their behalf. I think the risk elements or where there's areas of concern have to do with is the data being stored, on Canadian soil? It's not leaving the country, Patriot Act, issues, things like that. Is the data, being held for the appropriate amount of time? And I think three, one of the biggest challenges that people, want to know that you're sort of taking care of is that even just here in the province of Ontario, for example, the screening questions like around symptoms and have you traveled abroad and all these kinds of things, literally the government is updating those questions on a, in some cases two, 3 times a week. And so if you're a business owner and you're doing this manually right now or, sort of on your own, that's a lot of work to kind of stay on top of, the questions that the government's asking you to ask your patrons or your visitors or your employees. coming in. And so just sort of outsourcing that and making sure that you're working with somebody who is staying on top of that and managing that, I think is critical. And then, of course, from a security point of view, they want to know that they that the data is being held in a secure fashion, but that they also have access to it. And that's another key question we get asked all the time, because if a Ministry of Labor inspector shows up on site or a public health inspector shows up on site at a business, they are actually asking those business owners to say, we need to see your log of all your patrons, of all the data of how they've answered each question. And they have to be ready to turn that log over, on request for the last 30 days of information. And so it's not just us sort of holding the information, it's also how we manage giving them direct access to it in a way that they can be able to meet that requirement of what the inspectors are asking for on the fly.
Absolutely. And Asif, if I can just keep you on the hot seat for a moment, because there were one or two questions that have been DM'd to me, and this one is a slightly tricky one. So I think you would definitely want to have your tactful shoes on here. Earlier on you mentioned that CanaTrace as a product is provided for free, including the support. You know the saying pretty well. You're in the space of data. It's free, you are the product. Did anybody question why are you providing this product at no cost?
Yeah, that all the time. We get asked that at least once a day, by somebody who's signing up for the service. And quite frankly, like when I started GroundLevel Insights, in our mission vision statement, was published years ago when the company was open, it very clearly says, yes, we want to build a profitable data analytics company, but at the same time, we want to always find ways to give back and support other businesses around us in our local community, create jobs, and so on. And so this was, the creation of CanaTrace sort of was something that we felt we could do to meet that requirement. It begs the question, is there an upside for us in doing this and providing this service for free? Yes, the upside is that, today, as of, this morning, we're now at over 8,000 businesses across Canada who are now using CanaTrace in virtually every province and territory. And so what we've done is we've built relationships with 8,000 businesses who like us because we've been helping them out and doing something for free. And yes, we can go and start talking to those companies about the other things that we commercially sell, our normal location analytics solutions. So yeah, I could say it's created a great sales funnel for us, I guess is the best way I could describe it. Even though there's no direct revenue attributed to it.
Absolutely, and I think that's key to understand, is that nobody is doing this. Everybody has a motive. You've got to build your business, build your brand. You've got to build those relationships. That's exactly what I think, we asked you this question around, why are you providing it at no cost? It was about that relationship side, and that goes back to the trust that we spoke about earlier. That takes a lot of time to achieve. And I know that, Asif, you and I have had these conversations as well, is that it's taken you a good year and a half to build that trust. It can take just 10 seconds of a breach for all of that to be lost. And I do want to talk to you a little bit about the continuity plans that you have, so on and so forth. But let's go to Mary, and I'll bring this other question to Mary. Mary, cybersecurity attacks on the healthcare space, without diving too much into the technicalities, what's happening at the edge, what's happening once an individual traverses the network and is on the network, without getting too much into that, last year has taught us that attacks on healthcare can be a matter of life and death as well. All of you remember this case in Germany where a mismatch of records or a manipulation of records resulted in the wrong medicine being given to an individual. There's still some schools of thought that don't think that that mistake was attributed to the attack, but we all know that there can be pretty serious consequences when a cyber attack hits healthcare. Can you help us understand, Mary, that in a healthcare environment, you've got multiple vendors providing services to you, especially from a digital perspective? What are some best practices that you would recommend when bringing on vendors to use of your service and bringing them on to provide you services within your healthcare environment? Mary?
No, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. proper vendor onboarding is critical. And that's from starting off with a simple questionnaire just to assess their overall security posture, to the actual onboarding of them and providing them with whatever access they need, especially if they're managing any of these devices. You want to ensure that their connection into the environment, into the network, is done securely. There's no backdoor that could be open for any potential threat to come in. Making sure that if we're leveraging their systems, that they're fully patched, especially if there's a 0 day, following up with them. So having that open communication, building, again, that trust is important, because at the end of the day, there's only one objective: to make sure that everything that is shared is protected, and that the information is secure, and that we deliver the services that are needed to the patients.
Absolutely. And I think this realizes a very important point about the fact that when it comes to onboarding a vendor, and this is something we heard not only Dark Race and Juniper also mentioned, but earlier on, Sentinel-1 spoke quite a bit about this. eCentire referenced it as well. And that is about who's at the table when certain procurements are happening from a digital perspective. It is not just the IT folks, just the security folks, but the process individuals as well, the admin folks, the finance folks, looking for some of those red flags, making sure that process is followed to the T, because all of those ultimately give you a bit of an insight into how that vendor is performing. I've seen many cases where vendors have probably had the best solution after sliced bread, but haven't gotten through or have actually not been able to deploy their solution because of the process piece not being complete. And this is where cybersecurity doesn't just become a siloed environment, but becomes something for everyone. It's with reason that the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity has highlighted critical infrastructure and healthcare as two top priorities when it comes to security. And the people part of it and how we build community around it and build supports around it, extremely, extremely integral. We've got about 15 more minutes, and I want to bring Asif back into this conversation. Because Asif, over the last year when I've been working with you through my college and we've been engaging with you, one of the things that you've paid a lot of attention to is how's your staff operating with CanaTrace, especially from a you've put policies in place. For example, no one can access or create an account using a personal domain. You've created other access rules in terms of who works on the platform and who cannot. You've put processes in place internally. How difficult was it for you to get this in place, or was it a mere extension of practices that you already had? Asif?
Yeah, I think I'm not gonna lie. Like I think it took some adjustment. Like being a company that where everybody was working in an office for the most part, to everybody being remote. At the start of this, and trying to sort of re-architect how we allowed access to different systems and things like that. We also, from a development point of view, both on CanaTrace and our core technology, we were also working with outsource contract development companies as well. And so trying to figure out how to give them access and what to give them access to, and to manage those types of things. We had to create strategies and processes around that. And I think there was a lot of challenges early on. I think we've kind of stabilized, around some core procedures for that now. And I think we're in a good place going forward, because I don't think that we're going to all return back to physical office space. I think we're going to kind of keep working somewhat remotely, and I think that being able to sort of manage the security around that and the access to certain things is paramount, right? And we're also in a situation too where we're starting to take our technology forward in sort of anticipation of let's say CanaTrace hopefully not even being required, let's say in the fall, where maybe we don't have to screen people coming into a business anymore. But what does that mean? Maybe that means that we need a vaccine passport. Maybe that means we need other things. And so if you get to those types of scenarios, that means that other personal information, other health information, will have to be part and parcel of the screening and the other things that we already hold, right? So to me, that means, we have to think really hard about, partners that we're working with and how we're going to give them access to different components of our system as well. And, the role that APIs play in pushing data in and out of various different, technology sets around that. We're integrating right now with a lab testing company, Canatrace, into, with PCR tests and other tests that are going on, and actually looking to kind of show those test results in real time, and kind of marry that up with screening requirements for workplaces and things like that.
I agree. And one of the things that I had mentioned it to you, and I mentioned this yesterday as well in my session on cloud inequity, the cloud and digital transformation is not about where you do your computing from, but how you do it. And I think you've looked at the how very, very well. Just for our audience, I will say this, siberXchange 3.0 has something for everyone, right? From large enterprise to small startups. And if you get the chance to talk to Asif, that basic process of even just drawing out the flow of information from client to the platform, who touches it, who has access to it, just drawing it out, doing simple checklists like that have always helped ensuring that you've got a strong security posture and that you've taken the necessary steps. And I think at the end of the day, when we know that something could happen, a compromise could happen in some shape or fashion, knowing that you're able to prove you've taken the right steps. We have another 7 minutes left, and a question that has come in, and Mary, I'll bring this question to you. Again, you've been a very strong advocate for this, and you've always looked at the people side when it comes to security. Mary, not to discount any of the other environments, whether it's education, critical infrastructure, financial services, government services. In healthcare, the pressure is extremely. From the perspective of, as I mentioned earlier on, there's a life and death part to all of it. And you referenced that in your opening. As a security leader, having been on many C-suite positions in security, how do you take care of the stress level that you face, especially when one of your institutions is suffering a particular attack? Put it more curtly and simply, how do you try and keep sane and stable? Pressure and the life and death count can be pretty devastating if something goes wrong. Mary?
You try and stay as calm as you can, because if you start showing that you're under panic and you can't control what is happening around you, then that just funnels down, and then the situation can get worse. It's very difficult. By no means is it easy, but I guess over time and over the years of experience and having dealt with various security incidents, not necessarily breaches, knock on wood, you learn throughout the process. And the calmness that you bring out of you also transgresses down to the team. You just have to keep things into perspective. At the end of the day, we're all trying to achieve an end goal. And throughout an incident, the end goal is to resolve it as soon as possible. So keeping our calm is very important.
Absolutely, not just telling people what to do, but doing it with them. And I think this has been, a lot of the CISOs that are on siberXchange 3.0 and those who are going to be leading CISO Forum Canada, they've all begun to realize that, the silos and those walls, you've got to be in there with your team, in the SOC, so on and so forth, and bearing some of that pressure with them, leading from the front. It all does take a toll, but I think this other element that you also mentioned on is we're all in this together, and there are different challenges, and the ability to communicate, have good crisis communication practices, and the ability to have direct lines with your vendors. One of the great things that I know Juniper will be speaking at the keynotes that I found, having used their services before, is that direct access to the account manager, is that direct chain of command that who needs to be alerted for what reason. And when you see a vendor like Juniper have processes in place also, should your main representative not be available, who do you need to go to, and have a delivery time on when an incident can be responded to, all of that adds to that comfort. I will say this, and I've said this repeatedly through siberXchange 3.0. Forewarned is better than forearmed. You need to be forewarned about everything that's coming your way and be prepared from that perspective. Another 5 more minutes left, and Asif, I'll bring you back into this equation. A question that has come in, which I had a feeling would, and that is on the value of data. We've all said this a gazillion times. Data is the new oil. AI is the rocket. Data is the fuel. You've all heard that. I've used that quite a few times. Asif, when you look at the value that is placed on data, one example that I can give you, and a lot of folks bring this up, is credit card data, for example, in the underground would sell for, let's say, hypothetically, $5, right, per person, hypothetical. But healthcare data sells for about 20 or 25, sometimes 3 times more, 4 times more. Why do you think healthcare data is particularly interesting to bad actors? Asif?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question, and I think that at the end of the day, I think healthcare data gives you sort of a much more personal sort of touch on that individual, right? Like it's something that you can do harm with, and you can really have an impact on somebody's physical life. Credit card data, if it's compromised, some fraud can happen. Somebody can rack up some charges on my card, whatever. I can recover from that. But like if somebody messes up something on my medication or something else, I mean, like potentially you could kill me, right? So so I think there's a lot high potential, a lot more risk in the impact of what can be done with that data. So to me, that's why it's at such a premium, and needs to be even more protected, perhaps, than say financial data.
Absolutely. And I remember hearing this talk a couple of months ago where the individual had mentioned very clearly that, when you think about credit cards, while it can be devastating, the reality is you could call your bank. There are certain processes in place to get that money back. Not easy, but they are in place, and you can get a new card issued. With healthcare, how do you change your name? How easy is it to access, a new card? How easy is it to put a block? And then when you're talking about healthcare insurance data, the ability to use that to draw out loans, to draw out mortgages against your name, so on and so forth. It's just that healthcare data has a lot of different angles that it points towards, use in more ways than one. Great response to that, Asif. One last question for each of you, and then I'll summarize with what the audience can expect for the remainder of the day. And thank you both for your time. Mary, this question comes to you. Over the last while, you've seen the pandemic has realized a whole bunch of new vulnerabilities and threats, but you've also seen the growth of telemedicine. You've also seen the growth of virtual care, not just for human-to-human interaction, but even when it comes to people needing care for their animals, needing care for their fur babies, and making sure that they can get access to the appropriate care. They've been doing it online. Where do you see this trend of online care going? Do you think it's going to continue? Do you feel that once things come back to in-person, they'll kind of taper off? If you had to look at your crystal ball, what would you say?
I think the world of online is becoming stronger. I just, became a fur mom, so I've had to interact with the vet virtually. So that's been done through specific measures. You onboard, you create an account, they tell you to set up a secure password following the basics, set up multi-factor authentication. So I think there's a lot more protocol and transparency between the end user and the organization that you're dealing with, which makes it a lot easier when it comes to the online world. And it's only going to get stronger, because I don't see us going back into physical, whether it's with work or even with our doctors. Our world has changed, and I think it will continue to change, and it's happening in a positive, proactive way.
Absolutely. And when you look at some of the tools, for example, when I do the final session with Light Medical today, and Jill Clayton from the province of Alberta, one of the things that we are going to be talking about is when it comes to telemedicine, what are some of the innovations that are happening? What are the things that are happening from a computer visioning and ML perspective? And what security and privacy issues emerge from this? I think your point is well noted, that the fact that such conversations are happening around what do we need to be preparing for not only tells us that there are going to be standards and frameworks that vendors are going to have to adhere to, but it looks like best practices also to the citizens is definitely going to be a fundamental conversation for smaller municipalities, for larger municipalities, and communicating with with their citizens. I still remember Women in Cyber 2021. The city of Toronto had held a session, and they were talking about looking at cyber insurance for their citizens. Right. And I've said this all the time. It's healthcare insurance. It's not about healthcare insurance. It's about healthcare. That is right. Same thing with cybersecurity protection. It's not about you need insurance. It's about it's a right. You need to be protected. So it's going to be interesting times to see how municipalities, governments take to this. But the innovation is here. It is the calling card of the future, and I think that calling card has landed very firmly on our desks. Asif, I'll give you the closing statement for this day. And Asif, this question that I wanted to ask you has to do with challenges that you've had when it comes to finding the right talent to deploy healthcare related data. Has it been a challenge finding, one of the things that you mentioned really well is that, Ali, there's no shortage of technical folks. There is a challenge finding technical folks who can communicate well. How have you been looking for those soft skills to build the right team when it comes to healthcare and technology? Asif?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's absolutely accurate. I think there's lots of great technical talent out there, developers at various skill sets and levels, but not all of them are, personable, and are good at communicating or translating, might be a better word, from the technical into the business requirements and processes and interacting with, the end user side of things. So. That's always a challenge, and I think for us, we've been quite fortunate in partnering in a lot of ways with academic organizations like Durham College. We've done another recent project with York University and another one with the University of Manitoba. So we're quite big on partnering with academic institutions and leveraging senior, grad students and folks like that who've been, working in the field, working with health data, working with AI and other things, and sort of, able to translate that. We've been involved in doing a lot of sponsoring competitions and, sort of hackathon type of things. And I find, when you do those kinds of things and you kind of put yourself out there, the cream rises to the top, and you end up finding, really, great talent of people who are skilled technically and, sort of can present well kind of their ideas and their models. And that's ultimately what we look for always, because we're such a sort of outward focused organization, brands and clients and so on. And the tech it has to be amazing. It has to be powerful. It has to be secure, but it almost has to be a black box that they don't really care about. Right. So, at the end of the day, we have to kind of be able to communicate the tech in a way that's more about, use cases and operational efficiencies, and have the other stuff sort of just be rock solid.
And I think, employers such as yourself, especially those with healthcare in the healthcare data space, kudos to all of you for creating safe spaces for folks to come in, to make mistakes, fall 7 times, but get up an 8th. So thank you, Asif and Mary, for this wonderful opening talk discussion. And I hope it created a bit of context for some of the discussions that are going to be coming up in the next few challenge statements. Asif and Mary, I thank you for your time. I am going to ask you just to stay on for a few more minutes so that I can bid the audience adieu, and then we can have a 30-second debrief. So once again, Asif and Mary, thank you very much. And I really appreciate your time and your perspective. To the audience, in the next 45 minutes, you will have Juniper coming up for 2 sessions, where they'll be talking about various elements around how their technologies have been deployed to address scenarios where multiple devices are coming into a hospital network, foreign devices are coming in. It's situations where certain devices are plugging in to actual hardware that is connected to the network. What does network segmentation look like, and what does that mean in today's day and age? Furthermore, what does it mean when patient records have to be accessed remotely as well? How has Juniper, from a hardware perspective and a networking perspective, layered on security, not as an afterthought, but as a company that, as mind serves me right, which it usually doesn't, but in this case I think it is, 5 of the top Fortune 100 companies utilize their services primarily because security wasn't an afterthought for them, focused on security by design. So I invite you all to enjoy those 2 sessions, after which I will be returning after a day of teaching, where I will be engaging with Light Medical Clinics, CyberExchange advisor Ritesh, and Jill Clayton, the Privacy Commissioner of the Government of Alberta, when we talk about data, privacy, and telemedicine. There's one thing that I've learned from this session, besides the technicalities in healthcare, it also is that, and again, I'll quote an Indigenous elder where they say, in this complex world that we are in, we haven't spun this web together. We're simply a thread in complexity. What I do to you impacts you, what you do to me impacts both of us. Let's approach healthcare and approach security in a caring, concise, compassionate way, and we'll continue this path of innovation and everybody and ensure it's both equitable, accessible. Thank you all for joining the team at siberXchange. We'll see you with Juniper in the next 45 minutes. Stay safe and see you soon.